Hey everybody, it's Greg Rice here in the Bucket, Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and we're going to talk legislation, right? The General Assembly closed up shop last week. Governor signed the budget. The session is over, okay? Commences next January. What that means is you're no longer going to hear me bitch and moan about legislation that's being put forward. Okay, we're not going to be asking for your testimony. We're not going to be asking for you to speak in person. That does not mean go to sleep, it's all done, we're good. These bills continue to be brought forward each and every year. And what the sponsor learns from the experience, right? From the testimony, from the feedback from their fellow senators and representatives, is what to tweak, what to adjust for when they present it next time, if they are there, right? So, rent control, for example. I only have one sponsor, okay? Enrique Sanchez. Typically, there's 10 sponsors on a bill. That one is a radical proposition this year. But next year, there may be more sponsors on that bill because he went out, stuck his neck out, opened that conversation, kind of took all the heat, took the blows, and then next year, a couple reps might say, yeah, I like what you did there, but why don't we try it this way, and then I'll co-sponsor with you, right? And that's how a bill will gain steam. It's not like it goes forward one time, and it gets passed and that's it, or it dies and that's it. The senators and the representatives can present and represent any legislation they want. My point to you is that just because it's over now does not mean that you can sit back like two flats on a Cadillac and just say, we're good, I don't have to worry. You still have to stay active, vigilant, and informed. 3 things that I am, and you know that. Many of you know that about me. And I am good friends with the Speaker of the House, Joe Shekarchi. I've interviewed him. And he said to me one time, we were having dinner over at Iggy's. He goes, Greg, there's legislation being presented now that when I started, I never would have dreamed possible. Meaning how radical, how progressive, how outlandish it is. He said that to me as the speaker. And he's seen it all, right? He sees and hears all of the presentations, directly and indirectly. So that shows me that, when he got involved less than 10 years ago, fast forward to today, what's acceptable to society, what's palatable at the State House has evolved into an extreme situation. And what happens? It can only go up, right? Typically things don't go down gradually. They implode, they explode, and then maybe we can have a reset, but that does not typically happen in politics. It's a slow and arduous, word of the day, arduous burn. We typically do not talk politics. We typically do not talk candidates. Because it generally polarizes and divides the community. It divides you at home, perhaps, clients, would-be clients, fans. We got a lot of fans. People love the hats. If you want a hat signed by me, let me know. But this is a different circumstance, and that's why I'm making this video to endorse future Senator, I already call him your Senator, Jennifer Lee Caputi, all right? Nexus is supporting her candidacy solely and specifically in this instance because she wants to protect and preserve and maintain rights for property owners, which are you, whether you're a tenant or a landlord. It does not matter. She is fighting for you. So, She's running for Senate in District 26, which is essentially Western Cranston, into Cranston over to a sliver of Providence. So we'll put up her district, future district. She is an attorney. She's a closing attorney. All right, so she's in the real estate sphere. She's been 20 years as an attorney. She's a mother. She's a coach. She's a wife. She's a volunteer. She's a church parishioner. She checks each and every box. And she will advocate for us as landlords, as tenants at the State House, and not propose radical legislation that will ultimately cost landlords and tenants more time, more money, and more stress. So, you say, Greg, how is she going to help the tenants? She's worried about the landlord. The answer is this. It's so simple. I'm going to boil down every single piece of legislation for you with this one thought. Each and every time legislation gets put forward and passes, right? The ultimate cost burden ends up where? Who pays for it at the end of the line? The tenant. You want to give me a 60-day window to raise the rent instead of 30, okay? You want to charge the landlord for application fees, okay? You want to strictly enforce and penalize lead laws, okay? You want to do things such as this, and there's countless. Whatever the legislation is, ultimately will cost the tenant more money because the landlord has to cover those newfound expenses. So each time something is brought forward to help the tenant, it translates into higher costs for the landlord, one way or another. And those costs, unfortunately, and by necessity, that's the big thing, by necessity, are passed on to the tenant. It's plain and it's simple. And you might be yelling, you might be grinning your teeth, oh, I don't like this guy, but it's the truth. Landlords, we run a business. The business needs to cash flow properly so we can continue to run said business. Very simple equation. So, I'm not saying no legislation should be put forward, but I'm saying it should be tasteful, it should be thought about, it should be discussed, like we do with testimony, and there needs to be a compromise. Because the majority of this legislation is targeted for slumlords, which we don't deal with, which Stonelink doesn't deal with, which Lion doesn't deal with, which Hennessy doesn't deal with. We filter out those clients. We don't put up with it. We're the good guys and gals. We're making sure and holding our landlords accountable so that the tenants have a better and more efficient experience. It's the people that choose to be cheap, stingy, and dirty that are spurring and creating this legislation. The legislation is not coming from companies like us or landlords like myself. We're not the reason why politicians feel they need to take action. We're not. It's for that slim majority of punks, of cheap punks that are out there ruining our reputation, ruining the business, okay, and making us all have to go state our case, spend our time away from our homes and our families and our leisure, right? To say, hey, we don't need to do this. This doesn't make sense. X, Y, Z. And the slumlords, they're not down at the State House. They're not there. So we're picking up their shit. We're fighting their battles. And that's no problem. We'll do it. I'll do it. No problem. Frankly, I enjoy it. Okay, we talk about being active, informed, educated. That's it right there. So that's the silver lining, is it's coalesced us all. It's become an educational experience. We're networking with our politicians. which is a necessity. Okay, and we're not talking about, blue and red or this and that. We're just talking about practical business measures and what makes sense, what doesn't make sense for us. So that's the reason why I bring up the politics, because it makes sense. Okay, so once again, Greg Rice here in the bucket, your property and your legislation managed.